Want to be happy? Build a life, not just a business. Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and this channel was created to help you overcome the #1 challenge that is holding you back, a lack of belief in yourself. You watch these videos because you know there's something more inside you too. You've got Michael Jordan level genius at something. So today, let's live your best belief life and get some amazing motivation from Jeff Bezos. Enjoy.
You cannot invent and pioneer if you cannot accept failure. To invent, you need to experiment. And if you know in advance that it's going to work, it is not an experiment. And so that's a very important thing. They are inseparable twins, failure and invention. And so you have to be willing to do that. And it's embarrassing to fail. It's always embarrassing to fail, but you have to say, no, that's not how this works. If I said to you, you have a 10% chance with a particular decision, a 10% chance of a 100x return, you should take that bet every time, but you're still going to be wrong 9 out of 10 times, and it's going to feel bad 9 out of 10 times. And with technology, the outcomes, the results can be very long-tailed. The payoff can be very asymmetric, which is why you should do so much experimentation. Everybody knows that if you swing for the fences, you hit more home runs, but you also strike out more. But with the baseball, that analogy doesn't go far enough, because with baseball, no matter how well you connect with the ball, you can only get 4 runs. The success is capped at 4 runs. But in business, every once in a while, you step up to the plate and you hit the ball so hard, you get 1,000 runs. And so when you have that kind of asymmetric payoff, and one at bat can get you 1,000 runs, it encourages you to experiment more. It's the right business decision to experiment more. It's also better for your customers. Customers like the successful experiments. We all have adversity in our lives. I doubt if you really, if you know somebody, any friend or anybody that you talk to, there's no lack of adversity, and by the way, that's good, because it's what teaches us how to get back up. You fall down, you get back up. It always happens, and you get certain gifts in life, and you want to take advantage of those. But I guess my advice on adversity and success would be to be proud not of your gifts, but of your hard work and your choices. So, you may be, the kinds of gifts you get, you might be really good at math. It might be really easy for you. That's a kind of gift. But practicing that math and taking it to the next step, that could be very challenging and hard, and take a lot of sweat. That's a choice. You can't really be proud of your gifts because they were given to you. You can be grateful for them and thankful for them. But your choices, you choose to work hard. You choose to do hard things. Those are choices that you can be proud of. I spent an unusual amount of time with my grandparents, and especially with my grandfather on the ranch. So he had a ranch in South Texas, and I would spend my summers there from age 4 to 16. And when I was 4, they were taking me for the summer to kind of give my parents a break, sort of because they were so young, and it was useful. I was a handful, I'm sure. And anyway, he created the illusion for me when I was 4 years old that I was helping him on the ranch, which of course could not have been true, but I believed it. And then by the time I was 16, of course, I was actually helping on the ranch. I can fix prolapsed cattle. We did all of our own veterinary work. Some of the cattle even survived. And we fixed windmills and laid, water pipelines and built fences and barns and fixed the bulldozer that you guys talked about. And so one of the things that's so interesting about that lifestyle and about my grandfather is he did everything himself. He didn't call a vet if one of the animals was sick. He figured out what to do himself. And
so what does it mean? No delegation?
Being resourceful, I think, is that you can't, if there's a problem, there's a solution. And of course, as you mature and get into the business world and anything you do on a team, you very quickly realize that it's not about just your own resourcefulness, it's about team resourcefulness.
Also, if you want to have more self-confidence and self-belief, I've designed a special free training to help you get it, where every day for the next 254 days, I will send you a link to an unlisted video to your email to every day shift your confidence and self-belief forward. The science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action to make a habit stick. And I want you to get the habit of self-confidence and self-belief. The link to join absolutely for free is in the description below.
If everything has to work in 2 to 3 years, then that limits what you can do.
The stress primarily comes from not taking action. If you're doing anything interesting in the world, you're going to have critics. The only way, if you absolutely can't tolerate critics, then don't do anything new or interesting. If you're giving a great customer experience, the only way to do that is with happy people. You can't do it with a set of miserable people, watching the clock all day.
So does that include work-life balance and all those things?
Yes, but I teach 3 leadership classes a year at Amazon. I'm a part of it. They're bigger classes, but I come in and teach a session. And I always talk about work-life balance, except I like to use the phrase work-life harmony rather than balance, because to me, balance implies a strict trade, whereas I find that when I am happy at work, I come home more energized, I'm a better husband, a better dad, and when I'm happy at home, I come in and better boss and better colleague. And so it's not, you could be out of work and have terrible work-life balance. Even though you've got all the time in the world, you could just feel like, oh my God, I'm miserable, and you would be draining energy. And so you have to find that harmony. It's a much better word. And I think for most people, it's about meaning. People want to know that they're doing something interesting and useful. And for us, because of the challenges that we have chosen for ourselves, we get to work in the future. And it's super fun to work in the future for the right kind of person. Ever since I was 5 years old, that's when Neil Armstrong stepped onto the surface of the moon. I've been kind of passionate about space, rockets, rocket engines, space travel. I became a science fiction reader, and I've always known that I wanted to do something having to do with space, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about it for really almost my whole life. And that's one of the things, you guys will find that you have passions, and having a passion is a gift. I think we all have passions, and you don't get to choose them, they pick you, but you have to be alert to them. You have to be looking for them. And when you find your passion, it's a fantastic gift for you because it gives you direction, it gives you purpose. You can have a job, or you can have a career, or you can have a calling. And the best thing is to have a calling. And if you find your passion, you'll have that, and all your work won't feel like work to you.
It's easy to have ideas. It's very hard to turn an idea into a successful product. There are a lot of steps in between, and it takes persistence, relentlessness. So I always tell people who are, who think they want to be entrepreneurs, you need a combination of stubborn relentlessness and flexibility. And you have to know when to be which. And basically, you need to be stubborn on your vision, because otherwise it'll be too easy to give up. But you need to be very flexible on the details, because as you go along pursuing your vision, you'll find that some of your preconceptions were wrong, and you're going to need to be able to change those things. So I think taking an idea successfully all the way to the market and turning it into a real product that people care about and that really improves people's lives is a lot of hard work.
My job, one of my jobs as the leader of Amazon, is to encourage people to be bold. And people love to focus on things that aren't yet working. And that's good, it's human nature. That kind of divine discontent can be very helpful. But you really, it's incredibly hard to get people to take bold bets, and you need to encourage that. And if you're going to take bold bets, they're going to be experiments, and if they're experiments, you don't know ahead of time whether they're going to work. Experiments are, by their very nature, prone to failure. But big successes, a few big successes, compensate for dozens and dozens of things that didn't work. So, bold bets, AWS, Kindle, Amazon Prime, our third-party seller business, all of those things are examples of bold bets that did work, and they pay for a lot of experiments. I've made billions of dollars of failures at Amazon.com, literally billions of dollars of failures. And you might remember Pets.com or Cosmo, or give myself a root canal with no anesthesia very easily. None of those things are fun, but they don't matter. What really matters is companies that don't continue to experiment, companies that don't embrace failure. They eventually get in a desperate position where the only thing they can do is make a kind of Hail Mary bet at the very end of their corporate existence. Whereas companies that are making bets all along, even big bets, but not bet the company bets. I don't believe in bet the company bets. That's when you're desperate. That's the last thing you can do.
I think probably our most important piece of intellectual property is our brand name. And I think people, and I think this is very important for anybody who's going to start a company or market an invention to understand, is that brands for companies are like reputations for people. And reputations are hard-earned and easily lost. So the most important intellectual property that a company can have is, for us, it's Amazon. It's that name, but what it stands for. And we've worked very hard to earn trust. You can't ask for trust. You just have to do it the hard way, one step at a time. You make a promise and then fulfill the promise. You say, we'll deliver this to you tomorrow, and then you actually deliver it tomorrow. And if you do that over and over again, then ultimately you can instill your company's name with a reputation. And that's, I think, sometimes people talk about brands in this very amorphous way, but for me, I like to think of it as a person, and what is the reputation that that person has, and how have they earned that reputation?
After books, we started selling music, and then we started selling videos, and then I got smart, and I emailed 1,000 randomly selected customers and asked them, besides the things we sell today, what would you like to see us sell? And that answer came back incredibly long-tailed. The way they answered the question was with whatever they were looking for at that moment. So I remember one of the answers was, I wish you sold windshield wiper blades because I really need windshield wiper blades. And I thought to myself, we can sell anything this way. And then we launched electronics and toys and many other categories over time. And the vision became, because you read the original business plan, it's just books. We all get gifts. We get certain things in our life that are that we're very lucky about. And one of the most powerful one is who your early role models are. They could be your
was your
parents.
grandfather.
It was, in a big sense. My mom and dad, but my grandfather too. And my mom had me when she was 17 years old, and she was still in high school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And this is in 1964. I can assure you that being a pregnant teenager in high school was not cool in Albuquerque, New Mexico at that time. And so it was difficult for her. My grandfather went to bat for her when they tried to kick her out of school, and they're incredible. So the gift I had is I had this incredible family.
Now that you have about 600,000 employees, I calculated you're adding about 250 people a day. You've mentioned that you're trying to fend off day two.
Yeah.
And you've said that day two is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciatingly painful decline, followed by death. That is why it is always day one.
Yeah.
How's that work?
Well, so day one, this is a phrase that we use at Amazon all the time. I've been using it in my first annual shareholder letter from 20 years ago. And we say it's always day one. And it needs to be day one for the reason that you just mentioned. And so the real question for me is, how do you go about maintaining a day one culture? It's great to have the scale of Amazon. We have financial resources, we have lots of brilliant people, we can accomplish great things, we have global scope, we have operations all over the world. But the downside of that is that you can lose your nimbleness, you can lose your entrepreneurial spirit, you can lose that kind of heart that small companies often have. And so if you could have the best of both worlds, if you can have that entrepreneurial spirit and heart, while at the same time having all the advantages that come with scale and scope, think of the things that you could do. And so the question is, how do you achieve that? The scale is good because it makes you robust. A big boxer can take a punch to the head. The question is, you also want to dodge those punches. So you'd like to be nimble. You want to be big and nimble. And I find that there are a lot of things that are protective of the day one mentality. I already spent some time on one of them, which is customer obsession. I think that's the most important thing. If you can, and it gets harder as you get bigger. When you're a little tiny company, say you're a 10-person startup company, every single person in the company is focused on the customer. When you get to be a bigger company, you've got you've got middle managers and you've got all these layers, and those people aren't on the front lines. They're not interacting with customers every day. They're insulated from customers, and they start to manage not the customer happiness directly, but they start to manage through proxies like metrics and processes, and some of those things can become bureaucratic. So it's very challenging. But one of the things that happens is the decision-making velocity slows down. And I think one of the reasons that happens is that people, say junior executives inside the big company, start to model all decisions as if they are heavyweight, irreversible, highly consequential decisions. And so even two-way doors, you make a decision, it's the wrong decision, you can just back through the door and try again. Even those reversible decisions start to be made with heavyweight processes. And so you can teach people that these pitfalls and traps, and then teach them to avoid those traps. And that's what we're trying to do at Amazon, so that we can maintain our inventiveness and our heart and our kind of small company spirit, even as we have the scale and scope of a larger company.
I think it's the very rare idea that can be done by a single individual. Almost everything that is going to change the world, solve a problem, improve something, these are usually big efforts, and they require a team working together to really get something important done. And that has been the story of Amazon.com. At every step along the way, we've had a team here that is making this work. I mean, I don't know, even at the smallest scale, you have to figure out how to get help from your friends, from your family members, from people that you can hire in those early days. I think without that, it would never work.
I believe in the power of wandering. All of my best decisions in business and in life have been made with heart, intuition, guts, not analysis. When you can make a decision with analysis, you should do so. But it turns out in life that your most important decisions are always made with instinct, intuition, taste, heart. I picked books because there were more items in the book category than any other category. And so you could build universal selection. There were 3 million in 1994 when I was pulling this idea together. The 3 million different books active and in print at any given time. And the largest physical bookstores only had about 150,000 different titles. And so I could see how you could make a bookstore online with universal selection. Every book ever printed, even the out-of-print ones, was the original vision for the company. And so that's why books.
And when did you know that Amazon is going to be something way bigger than just a bookstore?
Well, I knew that the books, strangely, because I was very prepared for this to take a really long time. I knew that the books business was going to be successful in the first 30 days. Mm-hmm. I was shocked at how many books we sold. We were ill prepared. We had all the we had only 10 people in the company at that time, and most of them were software engineers. And so everybody, including me and the softwares, were all like packing boxes. We didn't even have packing tables. And we were on our hands and knees on a concrete floor packing the boxes. And at about 1 or 2 in the morning, I said to one of my software engineering colleagues, I said, Paul, this is killing my knees. We need to get knee pads. And Paul looked at me and he's like, Jeff, we need to get packing tables. and I was like, oh my God, that is such a good idea. The next day I bought packing tables and it doubled our productivity and probably saved our backs and our knees too. My greatest, I would have such a good feeling if I could be an 80-year-old guy and laying there thinking about my life, if I could say, look, there is now a bunch of entrepreneurs in space because I took my Amazon lottery winnings and built the heavy lifting infrastructure that does take billions of dollars in CapEx to lower the cost of access to space. That's how you get millions of people living and working. And by the way, we need that. For those of you who like to think about the future at all, you can do a simple calculation. We can argue about what limited resources on Earth and so on and so on. But here's a calculation that you cannot argue with, which is you take current baseline energy usage on Earth, compound it at just a few % a year for just a few hundred years, and you have to cover the entire surface of the Earth in solar cells. So we're going to have to decide, do we want a society of pioneering, invention, expansion, growth, or do we want a society of stasis? And personally, I believe, because the Earth is finite, and if you want a society of stasis, I think it's going to, first of all, I don't personally believe that stasis is even compatible with freedom, so I think for me that's a big problem. Second of all, it's going to be dull. Stasis is going to be very dull. You don't want to live in the stasis world. And so, of course, we're going to continue to get more efficient too. We have been. For hundreds of years, we've been getting more productive, more efficient. That trend is going to continue. But even so, we're going to want to use more energy per capita. And also, I don't want a stabilized population. I would love for there to be 1 trillion humans in the solar system. With 1 trillion humans, we would have 1,000 Einsteins and 1,000 Mozarts. It'd be an incredible civilization. Don't you want that dynamism? It'd be so much more interesting. This is for your great-great-great-grandchildren, but what kind of world do you want them to live in? I want them to live in that expansive world that is, learning more about the universe and moving out throughout the solar system. If you want to be an inventor of any kind, inventing a new service offering for customers or a new product or anything, being an inventor requires, because the world is so complicated, you have to be a domain expert. I mean, in a way, even if you're not at the beginning, you have to learn enough so that you become a domain expert. But the danger is once you've become a domain expert, you can be trapped by that knowledge. And so inventors have this paradoxical ability to have that 10,000 hours of practice and be a real domain expert and have that beginner's mind. Have that look at it freshly, even though they know so much about the domain. And that's the key to inventing. You have to have both. And I think that is intentional. I think all of us have that inside of us, and we can all do it, but you have to be intentional about it. You have to say, yeah, I am going to become an expert, and I'm going to keep my beginner's mind. Did I kind of anticipate what would happen over the last 22 years at Amazon? And the answer is God, no. So, Amazon started as a very small company. It was me and a few other people. I was driving all the packages to the post office myself in my 1987 Chevy Blazer. When I raised money for Amazon, I had to raise $1 million, which I raised from 22 different investors, $50,000 each. They got 20% of the company for the $1 million. And it was 40 people told me no. So I had to take 60 meetings to get 20 yeses. The first question was always, what's the internet? And I had to walk through that. And this was 1994, early 95. And so did I anticipate, fast forward to today and the current version of it? No. It has been one foot in front of the other. And I think that is true for most businesses, where you kind of proceed adaptively. It's step by step. You figure it out. You have a success, and then you kind of double down on that success, and you figure out what else you can do, what customers want. There are a lot of things that are a waste of time. You know, when you think about your life, I often tell people that I work with, if you can get, because people have very high standards for how they want their work life to be. And I said, look, if you can get your work life to be where you enjoy half of it, that is amazing. Because very few people ever achieve that. Because the truth is, everything comes with overhead. That's reality. Everything comes with pieces that you don't like. You could be a Supreme Court justice, and there's still going to be pieces of your job you don't like. You can be a university professor, and it's still going to be, you have to go to committee meetings, and you have to do things. You know, every job comes with pieces you don't like. And we need to say, that's part of it. And not resent those pieces, or try not to, but also try to minimize them. I tell senior executives, you should have the least stress. You know, there's this weird, I think, false idea that CEOs, I'm a CEO, there's this false idea that CEOs are under the most stress. Well, I look at that, I'm like, why? You're in charge. Why don't you delegate the stress? It's your choice. And so you have to figure out how to set up your life in such a way that you can minimize the things. And I find people don't dislike hard work. What people dislike is being out of control. Like, they can't control their life. They can't control their environment. This happens to me when I get overscheduled. I hate being overscheduled. I want some time to be able to think and free myself. We all have the same amount of time in the world. Nobody has more time than anybody else. And when you become a very successful person, one of the things, you start to get overscheduled. You have this event. You had to agree to do this. And maybe last night you were like, why did I agree to do this? I have to go on stage tomorrow. I wish I were really with my family. And, you know, or I hope maybe not this case. Let's say that you like this one. But in general, that kind of thing happens. And so you have to guard your time and try to stay a little bit flexible. So that's, for me, it's not a waste of time, but I like to have some freedom of movement rather than having every minute of every day scheduled.
When you buy over the internet, Amazon, do you ever get the wrong order? Is anything ever wrong? What do? Do you call up and complain, or you don't have any problems?
No,
with that?
I'm a customer of Amazon, hopefully like all of you in this room.
Is there one person full-time who services your account?
If there's anyone in this room who's not an Amazon customer, see me right afterwards and I'll walk you through it. It's, I have problems sometimes, and I treat them like the same way I treat a problem that I would get from a customer. My email address is famous, and I keep it, and I read it. It's jeff@amazon.com. I don't see every email that I get anymore because I get too many, but I see a lot of them. And I use my curiosity to pick out certain emails. So I'll get one from a customer, and there's a defect. You know, we've done something wrong. Usually people are writing us, not always, but usually they're writing us because we've screwed up their order somehow. And so I'm looking at this, and for some reason, something seems a little odd about that one. And so I'll ask the team to do a case study and find real root cause, or causes, it's usually causes, real root causes, and then real root fixes. So that when you fix it, you're not fixing it for that one customer, you're fixing it for every customer. And that process is a gigantic part of what we do. So I would treat if I have a failed order or some bad customer experience, I would treat it just like that. When I started Amazon, it was 25 years ago. I started Amazon in 1994. When I went to seek investors, the first question I had to answer is, what is the internet? None of my investors had ever heard of the internet. And the idea that I had in mind was to build a bookstore. I realized that we could build a store which would have every book ever printed in any language, in print or out of print, and we could do that online, it would be impossible in a physical store. And that was the founding idea of Amazon. But did I expect what would happen today? No. We started, I've been at Amazon when it was one person, me, when it was 10 people, when it was 100 people, when it was 1,000 people, and today, when it's more than 700,000 people and approaching 70,000 people just here in India. So no, I did not predict that. And actually, I think if anybody had predicted that, they would have needed to be immediately institutionalized in a mental facility because it's not a normal thing to have happen. My dream when I started Amazon was that one day we might be able to afford a forklift. So it's been a very fun journey for me. And by the way, I still tap dance into work. I'm having so much fun. Amazon has 14 leadership principles, and this is the one that often catches people a little by surprise, because one of our leadership principles is that good leaders are right a lot. And it sounds kind of like, well, great, but is there some way that I can practice being right a lot? And you're not going to be right all the time, but I do think with practice, you can be right more often. And I've observed people who are right a lot, and I notice a few things about them. The first is that people who are right a lot, they listen a lot. And people who are right a lot change their mind a lot. And people who are right a lot, they seek to disconfirm their most profoundly held convictions, which is very unnatural for humans. So humans mostly, as we go about life, we're very selective in the evidence that we let seep into us. And we like to observe the evidence that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. And people who are right a lot work very hard to do that unnatural thing of trying to disconfirm their beliefs. I ask everybody to not think in 2 to 3 year time frames, but to think in 5 to 7 year time frames. To not think about, when somebody says to me, congratulates Amazon on a good quarter, which is a very common thing to say. You meet somebody, they're being nice, they looked at your financial results for the quarter, they're like, good quarter. I say thank you. But what I'm thinking to myself is, that quarter, those quarterly results were actually pretty much fully baked about 3 years ago. And so like today, I'm working on a quarter that is going to happen in 2020, not next quarter. Next quarter, for all practical purposes, is done already, and it's probably been done for a couple of years. And so if you start to think that way, it changes how you spend your time, how you plan, where you put your energy, and your ability to look around corners gets better. So many things improve if you can take a long term. And by the way, it's not natural for humans. So it's a discipline that you have to build. The kind of get rich slowly schemes are not big sellers on infomercials. And so that's something that you have to sort of steel yourself for, discipline, and teach over time. We all get to choose our life stories, and it's the choices that define us, not our gifts. Everybody in this room has many gifts. I have many gifts. You can never be proud of your gifts because they're gifts. They were given to you. You might be, tall, or you might be really good at math, or you might be extremely beautiful or handsome, or there are many gifts, and you can only be proud really of your choices, because those are the things that you are acting on. And one of the most important choices that each of us has, and you know this just as well as I do, is you can choose a life of ease and comfort, or you can choose a life of service and adventure. And when you're 80, which one of those things do you think you're going to be more proud of? You're going to be more proud of having chosen a life of service and adventure. What motivates me when times are rough? I find if I'm stressed about something, it's usually because I'm not doing anything about it. And so if I'm stressed about something, I'm trying to figure out, why am I stressed? I'm listening to my body as a signal that something is awry. And then I find that the stress goes away the second I take the first step of identify the source of the stress. Why am I stressed about this? What's going on? And then talk to somebody about it. Find allies. I would say that if you can find friends who are interested in similar things or want to help you solve a problem, problem solving is inspiring for me all by itself. As long as I have allies, there's nothing more fun than getting in a room with a group of inventors and saying, look, here's the problem. Let's invent a solution to it. And as soon as you start doing that, I find that it turns from something that might create stress into something that creates fun. One of the reasons we have been able to extend into new business areas and first new product categories, going way back, we just sold books and then we started selling music and DVDs and electronics and toys and so on. And then we've extended into electronic reading with Kindle. The reason customers have been receptive in large part to our new initiatives is because we have worked hard to earn trust with them. Earning trust with customers is a valuable business asset. And if you mistreat their data, they will know. They will figure it out. Customers are very smart. You should never underestimate customers.
Your stock at one point, I think, went to $100, but then it went down to $6 or something like that.
At the peak of the internet bubble, our stock peaked somewhere around $113.
Thanks.
And then after the internet bubble, busted open, our stock went down to $6. It went from 113 to 6 in less than a year. So my annual shareholder that year starts with a one-word sentence, and that one-word sentence is the word ouch.
So most of those internet companies of the dot-com era are out of business.
Yeah.
You survived. What was that made you to survive, and virtually the rest of them are gone?
That whole period is very interesting because the stock is not the company, and the company is not the stock. And so as I watched the stock fall from 113 to 6, I was also watching all of our internal business metrics, number of customers, profit per unit, everything you can imagine, defects, etc. Every single thing about the business was getting better and fast. And so as the stock price was going the wrong way, everything inside the company was going the right way. And we didn't need to go back to the capital markets. We didn't need more money. The only reason, a financial bust like the internet bubble bursting is, makes it really hard to raise money. But, we already had the money we needed. So we just needed to continue to progress.
You don't choose your passions choose you. And I would always advise young people, actually anyone, to get in touch with what you're really passionate about. And it's a gift to have a passion. Some people are lucky they have more than one passion. They have 2 or 3, and that gives you energy. You can't force a passion on yourself. It just doesn't work. You can try, but it's unlikely to succeed.
This work-life harmony thing is what I try to teach young employees, actually, and senior executives at Amazon too, but especially the people come in. We're asked about work-life balance all the time. And my view is that's a debilitating phrase because it implies there's a strict trade-off. And the reality is if I'm happy at home, I come into the office with tremendous energy. And if I'm happy at work, I come home with tremendous energy. And so it actually is a circle. It's not a balance. And I think that is worth everybody paying attention to. You never want to be that guy, and we all have a coworker who is that person who, as soon as they come into the meeting, they drain all of the energy out of the room. You can just feel the energy level go. You don't want to be that guy. So you want to come into the office and give everybody a kick in their step. The secret sauce of Amazon, where there are several principles at Amazon, but the number one thing that has made us successful by far is obsessive, compulsive focus on the customer as opposed to obsession over the competitor. And I talk so often to other CEOs and some other CEOs and also founders and entrepreneurs, and I can tell that even though they're talking about customers, they're really focusing on competitors. And it is a huge advantage to any company if you can stay focused on your customer instead of your competitor. I have this great luxury. I love my job. I tap dance into work. I just got back from an amazing vacation in Norway. I got to go dog sledding and go to a wolf preserve and all this really cool stuff. But I couldn't wait to get back to work because it's so fun. And one of the reasons it's fun for me is I get to work in the future. So my job, I have very limited kind of day-to-day operational needs. That, I've constructed my job so that I don't have to be pulled into the present. I can stay 2 or 3 years in the future. And everything I've ever done has started small. Amazon started with a couple of people, and Blue Origin started with 5 people, and the budget at Blue Origin was very, very small. Now the budget at Blue Origin approaches $1 billion a year. And next year it'll be more than $1 billion. In Amazon, it literally was 10 people. Today it's 500,000 people, but it's hard to remember for you guys, but for me it's like yesterday I was driving the packages to the post office myself and hoping one day we could afford a forklift. And so for me, I've seen small things get big, and it's part of this day one mentality. I like treating things as if they're small. Amazon, even though it is a large company, I wanted to have the heart and spirit of a small one. My approach to criticism and what I teach and preach inside Amazon is when you're criticized, first look in a mirror and decide, are your critics right? If they're right, change. There are 2 kinds of critics. There are well-meaning critics who, they're worried it's not going to work, but they do want it to work. And so it could be, I can give you an example, customer reviews would be one of those. When we first did customer reviews 20 years ago, some book publishers were not happy about it because some of them are negative. And so it was a very controversial practice at that time, but we thought it was right. And so we stuck to our guns and had a deep heel on that and didn't change. But there's a second kind of critic, which is the self-interested critic. And they come in all shapes and sizes. So they can be any kind of institution, competitors, of course. And so when you are doing something in a new way, and if customers embrace the new way, what's going to happen is incumbents who are practicing the older way are not going to like you. And they're going to be self-interested critics. And so you do need, as you're looking yourself in the mirror, to try and tease those 2 things apart. We try to create teams that are no larger than can be fed with 2 pizzas. We call that the 2 pizza team rule. No PowerPoints are used inside of Amazon. So every meeting, when we hire a new executive from the outside, this is the weirdest meeting culture you will ever encounter. And new executives have a little bit of culture shock in their first Amazon meeting, because what we do is somebody for the meeting has prepared a 6-page memo, a narratively structured memo that is got, real sentences and topic sentences and verbs and nouns, not just bullet points. And it lays out and supposed to create the context for what will then be a good discussion. And then we read those memos silently in the meeting. So it's like a study hall. And we do that, everybody sits around the table, and we read silently for usually about half an hour, however long it takes us to read the document. And then we discuss it. And it's so much better than the typical PowerPoint presentation for so many reasons. I definitely recommend the memo over the PowerPoint. And the reason we read them in the room, by the way, is because just like, high school kids, executives will bluff their way through the meeting as if they've read the memo. Because we're busy, and so you got to actually carve out the time for the memo to get read, and that's what the first half hour of the meeting is for. And then everybody's actually read the memo. They're not just pretending to have read the memo. If you're going to do anything new or innovative, you have to be willing to be misunderstood. And if you can't tolerate that, then for God's sake, don't do anything new or innovative. Every important thing we've done has been misunderstood, often by well-meaning, sincere critics, sometimes, of course, by self-interested, insincere critics. I came across the fact, so this is 1994, nobody has heard of the internet, very, very few people. And I came across the fact that the web, World Wide Web, was growing at something like 2,300% a year. This is in 1994, and anything growing that fast is, even if its baseline usage today is tiny, it's growing so fast, it's gonna be big. And so I looked at that and I was like, there's gotta be, I should come up with a business idea and that get, on the internet, and then let the internet grow around this, and we can keep working on it. And so I made a list of products that I might sell online, and I started force ranking them. And I picked books because books is super unusual in one respect, which is that there are more book items in the book category than there are items in any other category. There are 3 million different books active and in print around the world at any given time. So the founding idea of Amazon was to build universal selection of books. The biggest bookstores only had 150,000 titles. And so that's what I did, and I hired a small team, and we built the software. I moved to Seattle.
I mean, you told your parents you were going to quit D.E. Shaw, where you're successful, making presumably a fair amount of money.
Yeah.
And you told your wife, Mackenzie, that you're going to move across the country. What did they all say?
They were immediately and reflexively supportive right after they asked the question, what's the internet? We haven't had any existential crises, knock on wood. I don't want to jinx anything. But we've had a lot of kind of dramatic events. I remember early on, we only had 125 employees when Barnes & Noble, the big United States bookseller, opened their online website to compete against us, barnesandnoble.com. We'd had about a 2-year window. We opened in 95, they opened in 97. And at that time, all of the headlines, and the funniest, were about how we were about to be destroyed by this much larger company. We had 125 employees and $60 million a year in annual sales, 60 million with an M. And that, and Barnes & Noble at the time had 30,000 employees and about $3 billion in sales. So they were giant, we were tiny, and we had limited resources, and the headlines were very negative about Amazon, and the one that's most memorable was just Amazon.toast. And so I called an all-hands meeting, which was not hard to do with just 125 people, and we got in a room, and because it was so scary for all of us, this idea that now we finally had a big competitor, that literally everybody's parents were calling and saying, are you okay? It's usually the moms calling and asking their children, are you going to be okay? So, and I said, look, it's okay to be afraid, but don't be afraid of our competitors, because they're never going to send us any money. Be afraid of our customers. And if we just stay focused on them, and instead of obsessing over this big competitor that we just got, we'll be fine. And I really do believe that. I think that if you stay focused, then the more drama there is and everything else, no matter what the drama is, whatever the external distraction is, what your response to it should be to double down on the customer, satisfying them, not just satisfying them, delighting them. You don't choose your passions choose you. And all of us are gifted with certain passions, and the people who are lucky are the ones who get to follow those things. And I always advise our young employees, I meet with interns and so on, you can have, and my kids too, you can have a job, or you can have a career, or you can have a calling. And if you can somehow figure out how to have a calling, you have hit the jackpot, because that's the big deal. I'm actually a big fan of anecdotes in business, not building a narrative structure around them necessarily, but I still have an email address that customers can write to. I see most of those emails, and I don't answer very many of them anymore, but I see them, and I forward them, some of them, the ones that catch my curiosity, I forward them to the executives in charge of that area with a question mark. And that question mark is just a shorthand for, can you look into this? Why is this happening? What's going on? And what I find is very interesting, because we have tons of metrics. We have, weekly business reviews with these metric decks, and we look at we know so many things about customers and their whether we're delivering on time, whether the packages have too much air in them and wasteful of packaging and so on. We have so many metrics that we monitor. And the thing I have noticed is that when the anecdotes and the data disagree, the anecdotes are usually right. There's something wrong with the way you're measuring it. And that's why it's so important to keep you need to run something where you're doing, shipping billions of packages a year. For sure, you need good data and metrics. Are you delivering on time? Are you delivering on time in every city? Are you delivering on time to apartment complexes? Are you delivering on time in certain countries? You do need the data. But then you need to check that data with your intuition and your instincts. And you need to teach that to all the senior executives and junior executives. The great thing about humans in general is we're always improving things. And so entrepreneurs and inventors, if they follow their curiosity and they follow their passions and they figure something out and then they figure out how to make it better and they're never satisfied. And you need to harness that. In my view, you need to harness that energy primarily on your customers instead of on your competitors. And so I sometimes see companies and even young, small startup companies, entrepreneurs go awry is they start to pay more attention to their competition than they do to their customers. And I think that in big mature industries, that might be a winning approach in some cases, kind of close following. Let other people be the pioneers and go down the blind alleys. There's many things that a new inventive company tries won't work. And so those mistakes and errors and failures do cost real money. And so maybe in a mature industry where growth rates are slow and change is very slow. But as you see in the world more and more, there aren't very many mature industries. Change is happening everywhere. We see it in the automobile industry with self-driving cars, but you could go right down the line of every industry and you would see it.
You made it. Was there a moment you thought, I might not make it?
The riskiest moment for Amazon, Charlie, was at the very, very beginning. I needed to raise $1 million at a certain point. And I ended up giving away 20% of the company for $1 million.
That's a hell of a deal for somebody.
A lot of people did very well on that deal. But they also took a risk, so they deserved to do very well on that deal. But I had to take 60 meetings to raise $1 million, and I raised it from 22 people at approximately $50,000 a person. And it was nip and tuck whether I was going to be able to raise that money. So the whole thing could have ended before it even started. That was 1995, and the first question every investor asked me was, what's the internet?
Failure and invention are inseparable twins. Everybody wants to be inventive. If you go talk to corporate America or any institution, actually, government agencies and so on, innovation is something to be proud of. People like invention. But the problem is they don't like failure. And you cannot have invention without failure. If you already know it's going to work, it's not an experiment. And only through experimentation can you get real invention. The most important inventions come from trial and error with lots of failure. And the failure is critical, and it's also embarrassing. And so that's why people, when we're kids, we always are doing trial and error, and we're never embarrassed. You watch a little toddler, and they will try for hours to put a square peg in a round hole, and it never works. But it doesn't keep them from trying. And they try things like that, and that's how they learn. And we all have that when we're little, and then as we get older, somehow it's not as cool as you get older to fail and to fall down. It looks clumsy. And so we get in our grooves, we have a set of expertise and skills, it's kind of a comfort zone, and you have to constantly push yourself to say, no, I don't care about failure. In fact, I say at Amazon, we have to grow the size of our failures as the size of our company grows. We have to make bigger and bigger failures, because otherwise none of our failures will be needle movers. And so I would see it as a very bad sign over the long run if Amazon wasn't making larger and larger failures. And if you do that all along the way, that is going to protect you from ever having to make that big, kind of Hail Mary bet that you sometimes see companies make right before they fail and go out of existence.
The most influential people in my life were my grandparents. And my mother had me when she was 17 years old. She raised me with my grandparents' help. And she was still in high school when she had me. That was not cool in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1964. But she did an incredible job. But I was lucky because I had not just her, but she married my father when I was about 4 years old. He has been a huge influence in my life. But my grandmother and grandfather were like second set of parents for me. And you learn different things from them because they're at a different stage of life and they know different things. They're calm about certain things. It was a huge gift to me. My grandfather had a ranch in Texas, and I spent all my summers there from like age 4 to 16. And he was the most self-reliant person. He did all of his own veterinary work, all the things. And to observe him solve problems and figure out how to do things with no tools and no resources and very small amounts of money, it was a huge education from an early age. So we were very lucky. One of the things that I know people who they don't have great family situations, and sometimes they break that cycle and they are the ones who pull out of it. Those people are the ones I reserve my highest admiration for. As the owner of the Post, I know that at times the Post is going to write stories that are going to make very powerful people very unhappy. And
are you upset if they are writing critical stories about Amazon, which they do?
No, I'm not upset at all. When I first bought the Post in 2013, never. And I never. I would be humiliated to interfere. I would be so embarrassed. I would turn bright red, and it has nothing to do with, I don't even get so far, I just don't want to. For me, it would feel icky. It would feel gross. It would be one of those things when I'm 80 years old, I would be so unhappy with myself if I interfered. Why would I? Yeah. I want that paper to be independent. We would be very naive to believe that we're not going to be criticized. I mean, that's just part of the terrain. You have to accept that. One thing I tell people is if you're going to do anything new or innovative, you have to be willing to be misunderstood. If you can't afford to be misunderstood, then for goodness sake, don't do anything new or innovative. By the way, getting it wrong isn't that bad. That's the other thing. When we make mistakes, and we've made doozies like the Fire Phone and many other things that just didn't work out, we don't have enough time for me to list all of our failed experiments, but the big winners pay for thousands of failed experiments. So you try something like Prime, and it was very expensive at the beginning. It cost us a lot of money, because what happens when you offer a free all-you-can-eat buffet? Who shows up to the buffet first? The heavy eaters. It's scary. It's like, oh my God, did I really say as many prawns as you can eat? Oh. And so that is what happened. But surely we could see the trend lines. We could see that all kinds of customers were coming, and they appreciated that service. My grandparents would take me every summer, starting at age 4, every summer, kind of to give her a break, really, for the whole summer. So I'd be with my grandparents, and on their ranch in Cotulla, Texas, which is halfway between San Antonio and Laredo. We lived in Houston, and so we would make the 5-hour drive out to Cotulla. They'd drop me off, spend a couple of days there, then they'd go back to Houston. I'd spend the summer. And I went every day to the ranch with my grandfather to help. Now, a 4-year-old boy on a ranch in South Texas is not a lot of help. But I didn't know that. I thought I was helping, and then by the time I was 16, I actually was helping. So I have, I can suture up a prolapsed cow. I can fix windmills. My grandfather was so resourceful, and that he made his own veterinary needles. He would take a little piece of wire and pound it flat with like a oxyacetylene torch, and then drill a little hole through it, And then we did all of our own veterinary work. Some of the cattle even survived. And so we had great fun out there. You know, we built barns and welded things, and he bought a D6 Caterpillar bulldozer used. It was like 1955 model year for $5,000. It was completely broken. The gears were stripped. And then we spent, you know, a whole summer repairing that. And the first thing we had to do to repair it was build a crane to take the gears out of the transmission. And so, you know, what I learned from watching him was just how resourceful he was. One of the precursors, one of the foundational things to being able to take risk is to have had some kind of support from somebody. You have to have some mentors. You have to have somebody who loves you. These are the kind of things that build up and allow you to kind of, you know, jump off into uncharted terrain and do something new because you know you have a support system of one kind or another. And I certainly did. So for me, I just want to point out that I feel very strongly that I've won a lot of lotteries. Amazon is one of the lotteries that I've won, but I had a big lottery with my parents. My dad is a Cuban immigrant. He came here when he was 16 years old, didn't speak any English. He's a great guy, and my mother had me when she was 17 years old. So she was a pregnant 16-year-old in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in high school, which was not cool. And she made it work, and her parents, my grandparents, helped her with that whole thing and made that all work. And if you don't get that kind of support somehow, it doesn't have to be your parents. Sometimes people get lucky. It's a grandparent, or it's a friend, or a family friend, or a teacher. It can be somebody. But you need that. Somebody has to step into your life. And that's a lottery that I suspect a lot of people in this room have also won, just like me. I like to putter in the morning. I get up early. I go to bed early. I get up early. I like to putter in the mornings. I like to read the newspaper. I like to have coffee. I like to have breakfast with my kids before they go to school. So I have my kind of puttering time is very important to me. And so that's why I set my first meeting for 10 o'clock. I like to do my high IQ meetings before lunch. Like anything that's going to be really mentally challenging, that's a 10 o'clock meeting. And because by 5 p.m., I'm like, I can't think about that today. Let's try this again tomorrow at 10 a.m. And so then on sleep, I get 8 hours of sleep. I prioritize it, unless I'm traveling in different time zones. Sometimes it's impossible, but I am very focused on it. And for me, I need 8 hours of sleep. I think better. I have more energy. My mood is better. All these things. I'm taking my Amazon lottery winnings and I'm converting them into reusable rocket vehicles so that we can lower the cost of access to space. Because right now the price of admission to do interesting things in space is just too high. If I look at what Amazon was able to do 20 years ago, we didn't have to build a transportation network. It already existed. That heavy lifting was in place. We didn't have to build a payment system. That heavy lifting had already been done. It was the credit card system. We didn't have to put a computer at every desk. That had already been done too, mostly for playing games, by the way, and so on. So all the pieces of heavy lifting were already in place 20 years ago, and that's why, with $1 million, I could start this company. Today, you know, and then there are even better examples on the internet over the last 20 years. You know, Facebook started in a dorm room. I guarantee you 2 kids cannot build a giant space company in their dorm room. It's impossible. But I want to create the heavy lifting infrastructure, kind of do the hard part, so that the future generation, 2 kids in a dorm room, will be able to create a giant space company. I always tell people, sometimes I get, we'll have a good quarterly conference call or something, and Wall Street will like our quarterly results, and people will stop me and say, congratulations on your quarter, and I say, thank you. But what I'm really thinking is, that quarter was baked 3 years ago. Right now, I'm working on a quarter that's going to reveal itself in 2021 sometime. And that's what you need to be doing. You need to be out sort of, 2 or 3 years in advance. And and then why do I need to make 100 decisions today? If I make like 3 good decisions a day, that's enough.
Take pride in your choices, not your gifts. This is something that I think is super important for young people to understand, and for parents to preach to young people. It's really easy for a talented young person to take pride in their gifts. They can say, I'm really athletic, or I'm really smart, or I'm really good at math. And that's fine. You should celebrate your gifts. You should be happy, but you can't be proud of them because they're gifts after all. They were given to you. What you can be proud of is your choices. How did you decide to use your gifts? Did you study hard? Did you work hard? Did you practice? The people who really excel combine gifts and hard work. And the hard work part is a choice. You get to decide that. And that is something, when you're looking back on your life, you'll be very proud of.
I was living and working in New York City in 1994. I came across the fact that the World Wide Web was growing very quickly. It was tiny, but it was growing very fast. Most people had not heard of it. And I came up with this idea. The idea initially was very simple. It was to sell books online. And I went to my boss, who I liked a lot. His name was David. And I said, I have this idea to start this company to sell books on the internet. And he took me on a long walk in Central Park in New York and listened to this idea in great detail. And he said, it actually sounds like a really good idea to me, but I think it would be a better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job. And I thought about that. That made a certain amount of sense to me. And he said, why don't you think about it for 2 days before you make a final decision? And so I went away and I thought about this. And I was trying to figure out how to make this decision, because in the moment, personal life decisions, those choices can be very challenging. And I finally figured out for me the right way to think about it, which was I wanted not to have regrets. I pictured myself, 80 years old, and thinking back on my life in a quiet moment of reflection. Would I regret leaving this company in the middle of the year and walking away from my annual bonus and all those things that in the moment could be very confusing? And I thought, when I'm 80, I'm not going to think about that. I'm not even going to remember it. But what I will do, I know for a fact, I have this idea, and if I don't try, I'm going to regret having never tried. And I know also, if I try and fail, I'll never regret having tried and failed. And as soon as I thought about it that way, I knew I had to give it a try. We're very interested in physical stores, and we haven't. I've been asked for years, we ever open physical stores? Literally 20 years I've been asked the question, and I always say yes, but only when we have a differentiated offering, something that's not me too. Because that space, physical stores, is so well served. If we offer a Me Too product offering, it's not going to work. And it's also we're not very good at that. Whenever we've tried dabbling in something that's a Me Too service, we tend to get beaten. It doesn't work. Our culture is much better at pioneering and inventing, and so we have to have something that's different. And that's what Amazon Go is. It's completely different. The Amazon bookstore, completely different. And we have ideas about how to merge Prime and Whole Foods to make that. Those are still rolling out. You haven't seen them yet. But to use Amazon Prime to make Whole Foods a very differentiated experience. And so what we're going to be able to do is take some of our resources, some of our technological know-how, and expand the Whole Foods mission. They have a great mission, which is to bring nourishing food to everybody, organic, nourishing food to everybody. And but we have a lot to bring to that table in terms of resources, but also in terms of operational excellence and in terms of technology know-how.
Be stubborn on vision and flexible on details. You really can't accomplish anything important if you're not stubborn on vision, because things that are important take a long time. They take teams. You can't do it by yourself, and so you really need to have a crisp idea of the vision. You need to stay incredibly relentless on that vision, but you need to be flexible on the details, because you've got to be experimental to accomplish anything important, and that means you're going to be wrong a lot, and so you're going to try something on your way to that vision, and that's going to be the wrong thing, the wrong decision. You're going to have to back up, take a little course correction and try again. And so you cannot be stubborn on the details. You have to be flexible on the details.
A young person starting their career, I think there are probably a lot of things. Some of them are very well known and people have heard them many times. They're still true. One of those is you should always focus on, a young person should find something that they're passionate about to do. And that's not going to surprise anyone. It's a clear thing to do. It's very hard. If you don't love your work, you're never going to be great at it. I think the other thing I would suggest to any young person, even before they start their career, is to really think about their choices. Because I find young people, and when I was young, I made this mistake too. You can get very fixed on your gifts. So everybody has gifts. You have gifts and you have things that you didn't get gifted. Maybe you're extremely beautiful. Maybe you're extremely good at mathematics. There are a lot of things that you can be given. But those things can confuse you because they're not the things that construct your life. It's your choices that construct your life, not your gifts. You can celebrate your gifts. Be proud of them. Be happy of them. Actually, don't be proud of them. Be celebratory of them, but you can't be proud because they're gifts. They were given to you. You didn't earn them. You can only be proud of the things you earn. And so as I got older, I started to realize I wasn't proud of my gifts. I was always good at school. School was always easy for me. And I was always proud that I was a great student. I got A's in all my classes. I was good at math, all of that. And I thought that's who I was, but it's not true. Those are the things that are gifts. What was hard for me is deciding to work hard, deciding to use my gifts in certain ways, to challenge myself, to do things that I didn't think I could do, to put myself in uncomfortable situations. I would say to a young person, you can choose a life of ease and comfort, or you can choose a life of service and adventure. Which one of those, when you're 90 years old, are you going to be more proud of? Look, we would all love all of our numbers to be smooth lines up and to the right, and that would be terrific. But that's not how it works. Those numbers are output measures, and I guess you could try to manage your quarterly earnings very precisely, but I think personally that would be a mistake. Most of the work that we put into any particular quarter happened years ago. So it's not, there aren't that many knobs you can turn during a quarter. I mean, you can, but they're like eating your seed corn if you turn those knobs. You don't want to do that. And so people, I think if you focus on the controllable inputs to your business instead of the outputs, in the long term, you get better results. Amazon, one of the things we try to do is have multiple paths to yes. And so here's a little thought experiment for you. If you are a junior executive at Amazon, and if Amazon did this in the typical kind of corporate hierarchy way, you had an idea. You need to get your boss to greenlight that idea, and then your boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea, and then your boss's boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea. There are probably 5 levels or more before that idea gets the go-ahead. Assume instead that you're an entrepreneur with a startup company idea and you need venture capital. You go to Sand Hill Road and you go to the first venture capitalist and they tell you no. And you go to the second one and they tell you no. Maybe your 20th one tells you yes. You got 19 no's and 1 yes, and you're still good to go. So that venture capital model there's multiple paths to yes. There were 20 people who could give you a yes, and it didn't matter how many gave you a no. So if you want innovative thinking, you have to think about how can we you want a large number of high judgment people empowered to greenlight things. You want multiple paths to yes. You want a system where, as a junior Air Force officer with a good idea, The first 5 people tell me no, and somehow I can still go pursue that idea. So you got to figure out, that's an organizational challenge that big organizations have to figure out a way to do. And by the way, I get, this happens all the time. I'll say, I don't think that's a good idea, but somebody else will green light it. And I'm fine with that, because usually the cost of the experiments is pretty small. Things only get expensive when they work, right? Once something works, you're like, whoa, we need to double down on that. Now, and then the spending can get heavy, and then those become big consequential decisions, and that's where the hierarchy and the using the judgment of the most senior people to me, this really helps.
Sure.
Well, 2 pizza teams is something that we've been preaching at Amazon almost from the very beginning, and it's a simple idea, which is no team should be so large that it cannot be fed with just 2 pizzas. And so obviously to do great things you need big teams, but you need to subdivide them. And the reason that it's so helpful is because there's a natural, we humans grew up around campfires and telling each other stories, and you're sitting at tables tonight that have about 10 people at each table. 10 people, maybe 12 people, is the perfect size to have a natural human coordination without a lot of structure. And if you want to have a big group of 100 people or 500 people organized, you have to have a lot of structure to make that work. And so if you can arrange to do big things with a multitude of small teams, and that takes a lot of effort to organize that way. But if you can figure that out, the communication on those small teams will be very natural and easy.
You know, Warren Buffett has this great quote. He says, you can hold a rock concert, and that's okay. And you can hold a ballet, and that's okay. Just don't hold a rock concert and advertise it as a ballet. Investors come in all shapes and sizes. They have different investment horizons, different approaches, different beliefs about what the right kind of portfolio looks like. And so it's not one, people use Wall Street as a shorthand, but there isn't one type of investor. They come in all shapes and sizes. And you have to be super clear about what kind of company you're trying to build, what your approach is. We laid that out in our 1997 annual shareholder letter. We said we were going to take big bets. We said they were going to fail. We said some of them hopefully were going to work. We said we were going to invest for the long term, that we were going to try to take advantage of market opportunities as they arose. And there's a certain kind of investor who is aligned with that approach. And so, again, you can hold the ballet or the rock concert, and both can work. Just be clear about which one you are, and then people can self-select.
Now I've got a very special bonus clip that I think you're gonna enjoy, but before that, it's time for the question of the day. I wanna know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? When you get motivated, inspired, you have a 35% chance of following through. But when you get motivated, inspired, and you create a plan of action, you have a over 90% chance of following through. And when you share it with other people, it jumps to 95% chance. Your likelihood of following through. And so I want that to be you from this video. We don't just watch videos here, Believe Nation. We do something. We take action. So I want to know your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week. Leave it down in the comments below, because I want to celebrate you.
I think this is a golden age of television. So when you look at, TV series today, the really good TV series are, in terms of quality, they're as good as the very best movies have ever been. And you're getting the best storytellers to come do television. You're getting the best actors to now come do television. One of the great storytellers is right here. Thank you for the help.
Thank you.
And this is a big deal when you can get the very best people, because this is one of those businesses where the viewer is always looking for something a little fresh. And so you can never find a formula, because as soon as you find a formula, it's not fresh anymore. They're always looking for something a little new. So it really takes human ingenuity. It takes people. The storytellers have to be in touch with the zeitgeist. And what I want Amazon Studios to be all over the world, I want us to be known as the most talent-friendly studio in the world. And the reason you need to do that, thank you, is because at the end of the day, it is the talent that makes those stories. Storytelling is the oldest thing that humans do. We've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years. Long before there was written language, before there was any medium to convey it, people sat around and they told each other stories. And it's how we teach each other things. And we learn from stories. We learn from fiction. We learn from fiction because we get to live an alternate life. In that moment, you watch this and you're learning it. So it can be fun, it can be action, it can be funny, it can be comedy, but the very best things take those elements and teach a little something. There's something in there that you walk away with and you're inspired by it. And it doesn't matter if it's drama, comedy, anything, you're gonna walk away with something. And there needs to be lightness. You know, you can't watch something that's just all heavy and you're like, oh my God, you know, I want to kill myself now. There also has to be that gesture. There has to be somebody who brings you out and lets you breathe a little bit. So this is so hard to do. That's why there is so many bad movies and so many bad TV shows, because it is one of the hardest things that humans do, is tell riveting, engaging, inspiring stories. But when you get it right, it's a lever that can change the world.
If you want some amazing motivation from Elon Musk, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
I think failure is bad. I don't think it's good. But if something's important enough, then you do it even though the risk of failure is high. And so I think